Hi, everyone, and welcome again to the After Party with David Burkus, celebrating the launch of his book, Friend of a Friend. And David, I'm going to let you chat with our attendees today. Thanks to everyone who has joined and has been patient with our getting started.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say to everybody as we start the recording, and if you're listening to this recording after the time, thank you so much. Like one of the weird things about being an author is that you just kind of chase your interests. Like I was interested in studying this and just kind of wanted to see what came of it, et cetera. And if you don't sort of find a market, you don't get another chance, right? You end up with everybody in the publishing world hating you. So the responses and the reactions that we've seen, people that have emailed me, people wanting to be on this call to ask questions and all that kind of stuff is really, I mean, it's humbling, it's flattering, it's all of the above. I don't ever want to take that for granted, that I get to do what I like doing in the world, because there are people that I get to study something and then regurgitate what I've learned, and other people get to sort of benefit from it, which I think is awesome. So thank you all so much for that. I want to, if I can, so John Fisher, whose username Hannibal Monk, said, because we were talking right before we started recording about the Resist Homophily chapter, and before we dive into everybody's questions, I want to ask if I can get a comment from him on it, because he typed it in the chat, but I'd love to hear what he thought on that, because it's not the typical networking advice. It's a much sort of bigger spot. So John, if you're cool with that, we're going to unmute you and let you kind of comment on that, and then we'll jump into everybody else's questions.
Looks like
sure, absolutely. Oh yeah. Sorry, go.
You're unmuted. Let's go.
Great. Can you hear me okay then? Hold on. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Gotcha.
Apologies, my other headset just died, so I'm going to switch real quick. Of course.
Love it. The technology gods are clearly shining on us today. It's been fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's like, wow, I use the good headset and it dies. All right, thanks so much. Well, as you know, I the day I got the book, I flew through it, and you actually wrote back to me and said, wow, you must be a speed reader, because I had responded the same day I got the book, because I just jumped in and immediately fell in love with it. Because honestly, I'll as kind of an idiot savant in my life, and biggest fear of an idiot savant is that you'll wake up the next morning, lost the savant, and then just be an idiot. So naturally, you're not always necessarily out there making friends and doing that. And so, and you want to stay in your comfort zone. And what I benefited from is realizing that everybody outside of my comfort zone is a better place to be, and a better way to look at it, because the truth is, the ability to learn, the ability to uncover things, the ability to make new discoveries, the ability to break through your own barriers and issues, because whether it's trust, whatever it is, comes out of that. And so I love that section, because it was just a reminder on something I've been challenging myself to do, and that is break away with that. And then when you take that and combine it with the multiplexity stuff that you mentioned about how much you know those people, how much you get to know them, that you actually serve yourself better if you make it more about them, and understanding what they're doing, what's going on. And then all of a sudden, you find later that people are coming back to you because you're serving them, listening to them, people you don't even know. And all of a sudden they want to know you now. And I know, just because in these tactics I've been using lately, working with people on GDPR compliance and security and stuff, just helping people voluntarily about tough subjects, all of a sudden I have a slew of people who want to talk to me and connect with me, and are, want to be friends now that I never would have expected, just because I'm jumping in, taking that risk, and doing something that normally would not have been something I would have done. So to me, I would tell anybody that no matter how good you are at networking, how good you are at people skills, you can never be good enough. And the more you throw yourself into areas you just don't feel comfortable with, the more this whole book's going to make sense, and the more power it will bring to you, and the more benefit it will bring to you. So there.
Cool. Awesome. No, that's a super powerful endorsement. And yeah, so for those of you that are on the call or watching this, John was like, so that level of excitement was cool. He talked real quickly about this cool principle called multiplexity, which is this fun idea that we need to get to know people more than just work. The short version, our work friends need to be real friends. Our real friends need to be work friends. Becky, you are laughing for some reason. What's
Yeah,
going on?
because I muted you, and the technology gods hate me today for sure.
You muted me? How dare you?
I was trying to mute John because he was done talking, then I muted you, and I'm laughing because
It's all right. Well,
the savant has been removed, and all that is left is the idiot here.
I love it. All right. Well, let's go. Who else has a question, a thought, a comment, etc.?
I'm going to let people unmute themselves and mute themselves. That'll probably work. I'm not going to touch anything.
All right. We'll go with that.
So if you're here and you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, we'd invite you to do that now.
Okay, I'll start. So
Thanks.
I was reflecting on and I took notes. I was reflecting on the numbers of Facebook people I had friends with, or how many other people had friends with, over 1,000, or I had maybe 300. And there was this myth or lie that I was thinking that because I don't have this many friends, therefore I am not as successful. And then another truth that I needed to combat that with is 75% of the people that I have on my friends list added me. And so I know those are genuine connections and they weren't just adding. But to counteract that, in college where I graduated a year ago, they wanted you to have a lot of LinkedIn connections. So they put assignments out there and said, get 100 people. And of those 100 people, like, I only talked to one of them because of the multiplex connection that we have. And we text back and forth on a weekly basis from the show of The Office, because we just have that show in common. And so of those 100 people, I don't have any connections to. It was just the surface level to get an assignment done, but there's nothing there for them to pour into my life or to theirs. It's very, superficial. And so I've noticed that my personality style, I like to add value to others, and all the friendships that I have, no one ever goes away. They're kind of like on pause. And so if they reach out to me again, it's like, oh, unpause, and then I go back and rekindle that relationship. But Bob Bodine, he talks about this who person that they're the one that's not looking for something in return. They want to make that connection to somebody else. And as you said on the podcast a couple weeks back with Rory Vaden, is that helping somebody else, there's this reciprocal value that you get just by making those two connections. So that's all I have.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I wanted to key in on something you said too with friends and they're not friends. You said one of the most, I guess to go with Dave, who had asked about surprising, I guess one of the other surprising things to me was when you look at the research on weak and dormant ties, which is the first chapter. So I hope I'm not giving too much of a spoiler for those that haven't jumped in yet, because we're in the first chapter. But one of the things that it's great about it to me is its permission to sort of describe the strength of the relationship as an interval of time, which means that no one, there are some people in your life you need to invite to not be in your life. But beyond those people, like, no one falls out of friendship with you. It's just the interval of time with which you check in with them is a little bit bigger, like a larger interval of time than other people. And I think seeing them through that way, that they're all friends, they just are different strengths of relationships. And just because you haven't talked to someone in a year or 2 years or 3 doesn't mean they're not friends. What's weird to me is I think we get so awkward about reaching back out to that sort of person. And yet when someone does it to us, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. I haven't seen you in 5 years. Let's go grab coffee. Let's go do lunch. Let's go do whatever. And so we're super afraid to reach back out to people. And yet when people do it to us, we're like, oh, that's awesome. Let's do it. Right. So like, we need to remember that that's the thing. Your friends are not friends. They just might have become weak or dormant ties, but that doesn't mean that you can't help them, that they can't help you, and that the relationship's not still there. It's just not, they're not your best friends. Yeah. So John points out, it's sort of like Seth Godin's permission marketing. This is permission-based relationships. Yeah. I like it. I like it a lot. Who else?
I'll go ahead.
All right.
So first, hi, David.
Yeah.
Hi, it wouldn't be a party without saying congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. So all my celebrations to you. And I confess that I haven't actually read the book as yet. It's upstairs.
Well, I'm sorry I spoiled it for you.
No, not at all. That's why I decided to come on, because I wanted to have that face-to-face appreciation for everything that lies behind it and for the person that brought it into existence. So just really excited to be part of this. One question, so excuse me if it overlaps with anything that's been said already, or if it's a little bit foreign to the whole context. But having recently started a new position as a business developer, I was wondering what some of your tips or tricks might be in terms of locating the best places to posit yourself in a networking environment. Because I know you have a lot to share about the house. So this is a little bit more about setting the right context for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I would say and I didn't use this. So there's a chapter in the book around seek out silos, seek out clusters and communities. And I deliberately didn't use this term because my good friend Pam Slim is also writing a book. And in fact, she has this great post. Maybe we can send it out after or what have you on what to do if someone else writes your book. So there was this moment like 2 years ago where we're in a cab together from an event going to the airport together. And she's like, "What are you working on now?" I said, "Oh, well, we're writing a book about networking and community based on network science." And she was like, "Crap, that's my book." Like I was planning on writing that, right? She has a totally different story and a totally different perspective. So it's going to be a different and better book. But she uses this term, what in network science we call clusters of communities. She uses the term watering holes. And I love that idea of like, okay, that's what you're seeking out, is what are the watering holes. So what I would say tactically is when you find the first sort of 2 or 3 people, I would always be asking, like we encourage on a lot of the podcasts and in the book to ask the question, who do you know in blank, to figure out who is 1 degree of separation away from you. I would do the same thing with, where do you go regularly? What trade associations or meetups or meetings are you going to regularly? And you're going to get a lot of different answers. What you really want to pay attention to are when there's overlap. So when one person gives you a list of 3 and another person gives you a list of 4, but there's 2 that are overlapping, that's a strong signal that like, this is a community that I need to be a part of for business development and that type of thing. And then go getting involved in those communities. So it's kind of like cart before the horse. If you can figure it out from afar and start diving into those communities, awesome. If you can't, then you've got to find the first 2 or 3 people and then start asking them, where do they go? What conferences they attend? What regular sort of, almost every city has the monthly chapter association, et cetera. You've got to go after kind of all of that and find the watering holes, which is Pam Slim's advice, not mine, but it jives really nicely with that seek out silos approach, which is chapter, I don't know, because I don't remember how that we ended up with numbers on my own book. No, chapter 4. There you go. Now I know.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's super.
Thank you.
And I will try not to skip straight to chapter 4. Thanks, David. That's super.
All right. Who else we got? Feel free to just unmute yourself. Don't wait for us, because Becky has already accidentally muted me once or twice. So we're not going to rely on technology.
Not at all. So David, I know you've been getting a lot of emails from folks while we're waiting for someone to unmute and talk with us. What kind of feedback are you getting on the book so far?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's interesting to me is I won't lie. I'm going to have a moment of brutal honesty here. So we had really solid success. The opening week rankings were really good. The total sales numbers are not as strong as under new management, but that had more to do with previous engagements and speaking clients of mine wanting to buy in bulk, what have you. But what has been awesome to me has been to see the reaction from people on social media who've read the book, et cetera, that I think is indicative of a stronger word of mouth push, which is, I mean, a book about this, a book called Friend of a Friend, kind of better have some word of mouth to it, right? Otherwise it's sort of useless. So that's been really strong and encouraging. I think for most people, the value, the most common sort of theme was what, I mean, I was taking a stab in the dark on the thesis of the whole book which is that like people, there's so many advice books out there. Here's how I did this. And if you do this too, you'll be successful. And I mean, everybody who's read the book, everybody's on the call is probably like, yeah, I tried that. It felt really sleazy. I felt weird. I felt like somebody else. I don't think people need advice. I think they know they need to have sort of something that's a bit more authentic. And what's more authentic than like what the research on human behavior and social science and network science shows, right? I've got a couple little things like the Who Do You Know in Blank that are kind of flipping from science to practice. But I was actually really hesitant to even do those because I have my sort of grand theory is that if you've got a better understanding with this, you can come up with something that's authentic to you. You know, nowhere in the book am I bragging about the amazing sort of network that I had, et cetera, because I mean, there are other people with more awesome networks. They're the ones that are featured in the book. But by writing about them and not writing about myself, et cetera, I can give a bunch of different stories with a bunch of different things. And that's my biggest hope, is that somebody sees, like what John was saying or what Dave was saying, like somebody sees one or two things that like, okay, that's an authentic thing that I could do. Or they at least catch the principle and then they can come up with something that's authentic to them that's in line with the principle. So it's really cool, even, you know, a week and a half in, to see that, which is really fun.
So David, I'm just going to steal the mic for a second and just put a nice, kind, appreciative reminder out. I know these folks who've come to the party are likely the ones who are really engaged and invested in this process with you. And if you're on the call and you've read the book and you haven't left an Amazon review, leaving an Amazon review for an author is one of the kindest things that you can do. And don't be intimidated. A sentence or two or three about something that you loved about the book is super helpful. And also, if you're willing to share the book on social, you know, snap a photo, talk about why it's been helpful to you. That's really going to help us keep momentum in helping more people with the message of this book. So forgive me, David, it's my job. Those are the two things that you guys can do. We'd love to see posts on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, where appropriate. Use that hashtag friend of a friend, and then we'll be able to see the amazing support that you're giving this title.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, you're right. We, one of the sort of every author clicks refresh on their Amazon listing the entire week of launch. We all do it. It's just this, and refresh. I swear that refresh makes the ranking go up, but sometimes it goes down whenever I click refresh, and you get really sad. But we're watching for two things. We're watching for what the ranking is, and we're also watching for Amazon reviews, because that's strongly indicative of like what word of mouth is going to be, et cetera. And so, oh, John, you're too awesome. Posting the resources link in there. That's cool. That's so cool. But yeah, Amazon, a lot of people make the decision on whether or not to buy. It's weird to buy an Amazon book, not on the 4 point whatever out of 5, because every book on Amazon has between 4 and 5 stars. Every book. They just look at the pure count, right? And there are folks even like this year that I know of that just recruit leagues of friends to write fake reviews and that sort of stuff. We don't want to do that, but anything that we can do to sort of come out ahead and get that number up is awesome. Like Becky said, any picture you could take and share. We've got a really memorable cover, which I had nothing to do with, but I'm in love with. And the more that like I think it gets seen, the better it'll be. So thank you, Becky, for that. I appreciate it, and thank you, everybody. All right, so who else? Don't. Becky's really good at filling time, but all right, Dave's raising his hand again. Yeah. We'll go for it if you're willing. Is anybody? Let me double check, because that'd be 2 for you, Dave. If anybody else wants to jump in, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll go to Dave. All right, Dave. I guess that's you.
Cool. Have you seen any like cultural differences? So whether that's because I'm traveling to Norway next week, and is there differences in terms of building rapport, relationship development in those in foreign countries? And conversely, like New York, it's seems very, it's a transactional type of city and stuff like that, where, reciprocity is really kind of ingrained into the culture to some extent.
Yeah, so I would say a lot of the principles in the book are based off of the study of networks, and there's studies from a variety of different cultures, and the network itself doesn't change all that much, with one exception, which is that multiplexity piece. Like you said, New York, and I've found Los Angeles and a couple other sort of coastal cities to be a little less multiplex and a little more transactional. I'm going to keep you in the work bucket or the what have you. Then you get out into like rural America, and it's very multiplex, right? You work with people who are also your best friends, who also are in your bowling league, who also do all this sort of stuff. That same cultural variance shifts in culture to culture too. So I was just before the book launched, I had the chance to be in China for sort of a week and a half. And that is, again, a very sort of multiplex. Who your family is and who those connections are is important. We don't dive into it too much in the book because we're looking at the network science principles, not the behavioral stuff. There are 2 resources I would give you for that, though. Vanessa Van Edwards' book Captivate is a great book. It's from a US perspective, but it's a great book on what's going on behind the scenes when people are having conversations, and all of that behavioral stuff. And then Erin Meyer has a fantastic, for any business leaders who are doing business multiculturally, has a fantastic book called The Culture Map. It's essentially, if you were in university and you learned, I know because I'm a business school professor, we talk often about Hofstede and the cultural dimensions and what have you, which is great, but it's a 50-year-old study. Erin's Culture Map is like the new Hofstede. It's a great way to analyze and understand the culture you're about to go into and what things change and all that. It's a fantastic start. So Captivate and the Culture Map are, when you're specifically looking at that, I think great places to go. In terms of Friend of a Friend, the only thing we've seen is that multiplexity dimension. And again, the only advice I'd have in that capacity is just sort of know what culture you're getting into. Is this something where multiplexity matters all that much, or is this something where people are not gonna want to? Again, because I live in the middle of the country, I tend to believe, I'm a strong advocate for like, don't ask the what do you do question, seek out this multidimensional type of person. But when I'm in New York City, when I'm in Los Angeles, when I'm in San Francisco, a couple other places like that, I do throw the question out because I know that's what people care about.
Great. Thank you so much.
So we got a question in the chat. It says, just finished the chapter on weak and dormant ties. Would not have considered attempting to reignite those connections. I have lots of connections on LinkedIn and don't keep in contact with. So try to reach out again just to see how they're doing, and can say I'm not looking to get anything from them, which is awesome. The one thing I would add on that is, before you reach out, don't just reach out to reach out. I would add, like, if it's people that are common, like start with the people that are frequent on LinkedIn and are posting updates of what's going on in their life, and then use that as the excuse to reach out. It can be little stuff like that they're moving, or they just got a new job, or even like, here's the most amazing thing you can do on LinkedIn is when someone has a work anniversary, don't click the congrats on your work anniversary button that everybody gets inundated with. Just send them an email. Look, find their email address or call them out. Just do something a little bit more personal so you're not lost in the deluge. And then maybe share a memory that you have from when you guys were connected, or you both were connected, what have you. Anything you can do to make it a little bit more personal, that's going to increase your chances of success, et cetera. And then I think, Cartrell, you also were the one that said authenticity, reaching out. Did read Captivate, familiar with her work. And yes, I mean, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is still sort of the standard, right? So I mean, it's one of those advice books, but it's good advice. And at the very least, it's sort of like Jim Collins' Good to Great. There's certain books you have to read because it feels like everybody has read them, right? So you just have to be ready for the discussion. And that's how I feel about How to Win Friends and Influence People too. All right, who else we got? If you would rather not be on camera, et cetera, I've just proven we can do it in the chat too if you want to throw something in there. I obviously don't mind being on camera since I'm the one dominating the conversation anyway.
You're doing great, David. I wonder if the folks on the call know about your two other books. You mentioned Under New Management. I have Myths of Creativity on my bookshelf over here. David, just an author question because I'm curious, and we're just coming off your launch. Do you check the rankings of your other two titles when the new book comes out? Because we've seen with our authors that quite often what will happen is, hey, you guys just discovered, if you're on camera and you only discovered David with this book, will you raise your hands? And so now you need to go buy the other two books, right? Because when you find that you love someone's writing, then you want to read them all. It's not just for fiction, folks. Go buy the other two books.
Becky, you're the quintessential. No, so your question was, do I check the rankings? No. I do make a note in, so there's the Amazon ranking, and then there's this thing called BookScan that is sort of like Billboard or sort of like the Nielsen ratings. In fact, they're all done by the same company. They're all done by Nielsen. That shows you week-to-week sales. And I definitely noticed that when you have sort of the launch of the next book, the other ones happen. And I think to me, I just think it's the Amazon free shipping effect. Right? I think people are like, oh, I put it in the cart and it's $20, but I get free shipping when I get to $35. Might as well put another book in the cart, right?
Oh, doesn't everyone have Prime? Doesn't everyone have Prime?
Actually, if Prime, I read somewhere, Amazon Prime is the most populated state in America right now. Like it's more than California, right? There's like 78 or 68 million people that have Amazon. So you're right. You're probably right. But
that doesn't mean people can't go buy the other 2 books. I'm kind of shameless here, David.
Yeah, you're being a little, yeah. You know what's interesting to me, I'll say this, is that it was inside of Under New Management and the studies on how organizations function as networks that sort of was the kernel of here's why I think we should write a book on networking and on these studies. And then after the fact, what I'm noticing is that the similarities actually happen more in Myths of Creativity. There's this whole idea in Myths of Creativity about originality myth, which is ideas aren't wholly original, they're combinations of pre-existing ideas. And this idea of the expert myth, which is you shouldn't actually dive super deep into one area. You should be deep in an area, but keep a working knowledge of lots of other spaces. And those really overlap nicely with, again, what one of the goals of Friend of a Friend is that network science shows bigger is not better if bigger doesn't also mean different, and that you're not also bridging structural holes and all that sort of stuff. So it's weird to me that the overlaps are a bit more there. That said, I'm going to throw him right out in front of the crew because Lou Prosperi just jumped on, and he has been a reader and a guy who's commented on my work for a while. Lou, I'm curious what you see as parallels, because you also are an author in the creativity space.
But you're going to have to unmute.
You're going to have to unmute yourself, Lou.
If you scroll over,
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, yeah, I figured it out. Just, okay, so sorry I'm late. First of all, I meant to be here, but I just got off a team meeting, so I couldn't really ask the rest of my team to change because I wanted to join this. Well, I am fascinated with the idea. It's interesting you asked because lately I've been more and more interested in the idea of how the concepts in books like yours, like Dan Pink's When, like Deep Work, like The Power Moments overlap. And in fact, I've been playing with sort of a graphic representation of this where I take a picture, like a Venn diagram that shows the 2 books and where they meet and the idea in the middle. And so for instance, one example is to use the EI, P, and C of The Power Moments from the Heath brothers when working on shared activities that you talk about in Friend of a Friend, like how those ideas sort of could overlap. I actually hadn't gotten too far into thinking about the overlaps in your books, but they're certainly there. It's interesting to sort of try to look for the, I think the phrase that you used once is the golden thread that connects the 3 books as the thought processes that have led you there. So I don't know if that's an appropriate response to your question.
No, you actually make me realize that I need to reread Power Moments. I read it as a galley long before mine came out, and I was actually in that stage. You go through this stage where you've finished writing and proofreading the book so often that you are sick of it and you don't want to see it. And so for a solid 4.5 months, I was not looking at my own book. And then about 3 months before launch, I reread my own galley to remember what was in it and sort of see it with fresh eyes, et cetera. But in that interim where I wasn't thinking about it, that's when I read Power Moments, and I probably do need to read, because I think that idea of here's how you structure the most valuable activities for everyone involved would be really, really useful, especially to sort of, if you're a meeting planner, if you're a trainer, or even if you're just a person looking to throw something to grow your network, you want to be able to know how to do it powerfully. That's kind of cool. Good thought.
Right.
All right. So who else? I'm looking at a couple different people that are really content to just sort of sit back and listen, which is cool. But if you want to jump on and talk, I would love to hear your questions, thoughts. Even if you haven't read the book yet, we can this was kind of a cool preview video for some folks of coming attractions when they finally do read it, et cetera. But yeah, if you've got a question, please feel free to jump in.
I might go again, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sorry,
Becky is a fan of your South African accent, which is funny because, for you, we're all the ones with really weird accents, right? So there you go.
No, it is funny. As an English person, I do hear the American accent, and we always have a fondness for it. But it's
good. I'm glad it's a fondness. Still,
it's lovely.
I'm glad it's still a fondness.
Right, better than an irritation, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's lovely. It's lovely. So my question for you, David, is I completed my MSc in systems thinking. So I'm absolutely fascinated by the way that networks work, but particularly intentionality, because intentionality is the first iteration that everything then moves through. So I'm very curious to know, and you said it when we first started this Zoom meeting, that being intentional is very important. So this is a request for storytelling on your part. If you might share any experiences that you've had which seemed quite serendipitous or had an element of synchronicity to them after being very intentional. I'm just curious to see how that manifests in your embodied work with networks.
So serendipitous after being sort of very intentional. There's one that pops into my mind right away, but I'm a little gun shy about talking about it because I don't know if I want it on permanent record and recording and what have you. But I've said, I'll just go ahead and do it because what the heck. I've said multiple times in multiple different interviews that Dan Pink is my sort of career-ish role model type person. There's several other people in the space, right? Chip and Dan Heath, etc. The people I like to call them, like every nonfiction business book author is either like a deep dive in the same subject and they write multiple books that look at it from different angles author, or an intellectual ADHD author, or just like I'm going to jump from subject to subject to subject. I'm much more that. And so is Dan, and so are the Heaths and those sort of things. So, but one of the things I became really fascinated about is in 2014, 2015, I started noticing that a lot of really cool, smart people that I admire were going back to television and back to video. So you had Steven Johnson and the How We Got to Now series on PBS, which is fantastic if you've never watched it. Dan even had his crowd control series, and he and I traded a couple emails about what that was like, et cetera. And I don't like, this isn't me being like arrogant and being like, I want my own TV show, but it did make me realize that like video is in an age where people are cutting cable and it's streaming is going to be a powerful way to get messages out there. Even more so than books, because the number of people that are reading books every year is shrinking, but the number of people that will tune into an actually like well-produced educational video is huge. And so fast forward. So then I'm at, this is a serendipitous moment. I'm at the TEDx University of Nevada where I was giving the talk that became sort of the preview of the book. And one of the other guys there was a guy named John Brinkus. And John actually gave an awesome talk that everybody should watch on why girls and boys should play in the same sports in the same leagues with the same rules from day one, and how over time that would lead to like an overlap to where we probably wouldn't even need any sort of gender segregation in sports because of what sort of thing. Anyway, I'm bad at regurgitating the argument, but it was fantastic. John also was the producer of a show called Sports Science for like 10 years. Before that, he was the producer of multiple X Sciences. So he started with a show called Fight Science and whatever. And basically is like this masterful guy at figuring out how do you visualize something scientific for a visual, for a type of video medium, et cetera. And John and I have since become really, really good friends. And I don't know what's going to happen there. We're still in that serendipitous moment. But I've already learned a lot about like, okay, when it comes to video and trying to use that to convey similar ideas, I know way more now in 2018 than I did when I sort of began that journey. So that's been a serendipitous one. But to the intentionality piece, it goes right back to the shared activity. It comes from, I was there to do a specific thing, but also I was in a room that had a natural filter. It wasn't just an unstructured meetup type of event. It was people come here because they're specifically interested in doing something and being something. And TED as an organization, as well as TEDx, is really good about shaping the whole conference as a shared activity that gets you the opportunity to meet those people, which is really, really cool. And again, speaks to that idea of being intentional about what watering holes you're going to go to, because just the open-ended ones are not going to work as effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you. So by the way, Michael chimed in something in the chat. Hi, Michael. The idea of this theme of relevance, and I love that in every conversation, every outreach, every relationship, whether you're pinging a weak tie or dormant tie, you're making an introduction or what have you, that combination of relevance, authenticity, passion, that levels it up from just that sort of transactional, sticky, icky network. Sticky, icky, that sounds so... Can you tell that I've been hanging out with my 6-year-old, my 4-year-old all morning before this? that levels it up from all of those to something more authentic and a better quality relationship over time. So yeah, totally.
So David,
yeah.
So I have a question, just because you brought that anecdote and that story you brought in, but thinking of Dan and his books like The Drive. So in 2009, right, he presents that book. Then he comes back in 2017 and creates the Guide to the Drive. Look at that long time span in between that. And you as an author, with the books you've read, and like I said, talking about the overlap and the crossover, how much does something like that bring it back around? How does it improve what he originally did when he talked about what motivates us and then brought it forward? How do you as an author see that impacting? Because I think it's just like engaging with friends of a friend again, and friends and what you experienced back then, and now you have a chance to experience something new with them, and maybe take that original touch point that got you connected, just like his book Drive, and then you re-engage on it. Well, where are you in that? You see what I mean? It's like his Guide to the Drive. Like, well, you know what I'm saying? I know it sounds kind of a strange question, but I've seen an evolution in your writing too. So I'm just kind of asking that from that standpoint.
Yeah. So I think there's two things. The first, and before those two things, I would say I would absolutely love to write something that has legs to the level of Drive, where you can even get invited to come back and do an update. But one of the weird things about writing about social science is that if you wait long enough, you'll inevitably be wrong, right? In other words, like, science is an ever-moving thing. Like, not to use Dan, I'll use another example. Amy Cuddy, her book Presence is fantastic. She rose to prominence because of the sort of power-posing studies that were showing a bunch of different things: increased levels of confidence, but also decreases in cortisol, increases in testosterone, I think, some hormone, some positive hormone for the situation.
It's testosterone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but then trying to replicate it sort of failed, and now, like, so then there was this whole, like, what do we do with all this research? Did you come to it too soon? Did you not? What have you? And then now I don't even know how long it's been since that came out. There's a whole meta-analysis showing like, no, there is a strong and powerful effect in confidence, even if it's not seen in hormonal levels. If it's confidence, then it's going to be seen in sort of neurotransmitter levels and that sort of stuff, which is really cool. So essentially, like, she went from being right to being wrong to being pretty much right, pretty close to the target again. In her mind, she's able to withstand all of this criticism because she's like, this is how science works. We have findings, then we debunk them, then we debunk the debunking, and it goes, well, this idea wasn't that far off, etc. Like, every idea is kind of being tested like that. So what was really cool in Dan's scenarios, they'd be able to go back and look and go, okay, what's been updated? There's stuff that's in the midst of creativity that's probably not all that accurate anymore, right? Like, we talked about the breed myth and dismissed genetics, and that was right before epigenetics came up. And it turned out to be like, well, there could be genetics, but it's also how they express, which, by the way, is sort of lends more credence to nurture versus nature. But that's a whole, but like, the chance to go back and rewrite that would be awesome. So I think sometimes you can do that. And I think that's why people can build, the second thing is, I think that's why people can build careers in two different spaces. They can be the deep dive, and I'm going to just every couple of years refresh, here's what the science says and a new angle on it. And then there's the sort of nomads, like myself. It's really just a matter of what I think you're interested in. It's kind of cool when the nomad gets the chance to be the deep diver, like Dan can kind of do in that. But it's also really fun to go after a fresh new topic. I mean, like, the favorite part for me of writing any book is actually the research, right? The research side of it, rather than, I mean, the writing is agony, and then the talking about it again is fun, right? So it'd be fun to do it. It'd be fun to run all of that. But I also like being the nomad. And it's just one of the weird things about it, that you do have to keep revisiting your own sort of ideas. A book is really just a snapshot in time. And hopefully, like, the academic in me tries to go, okay, what are the things that are the least likely to get debunked later? They've been proven over and over and over and over and again so much that it's probably not going to get debunked. But I mean, it happens. We used to think the world was flat, and then we thought it was a sphere, and now we know it's actually slightly pear-shaped, which is, what it is.
So, David, are you going to give folks a sneak preview of what you're thinking about for the next book? Or is that like top secret under wraps?
So I will say it's the least nomadic traveling for the next book. I mean, I'm sold out into figuring out where this book goes and where it resonates, because that's going to affect it. But I did get bored a couple weeks ago and write a proposal, and I like it. And so I think where we're looking is, this is a book about how to connect. This is the galley. Sorry, this is the real one. About how to connect with people, how networks work, how communities work, all of that. And I think there are other areas in our lives where communities are more important than the self. And I mean, the mere fact that we call a series of books about personal development self-help books is a problem, because the communities that you are a part of are going to help you develop more than anything else, right? So that's an area of exploration for me. Like I said, I like the research side. The writing is agony, and then I love talking about it in the end. I have not even begun the research side, but I have oh, that's interesting. Let's see where that goes. And we'll see what happens on that. My agent and my editor and those, we haven't had those conversations yet, because whatever we do is going to be influenced by where this book goes or doesn't go, because that's going to be indicative of reactions and that kind of stuff. Like I said earlier, I'm so blessed in life to get to do what I like to do because there are other people who are interested in it. So I have to be able to prove that there are people interested in this new idea. Otherwise, we won't get the chance to do it.
Waiting for the market to speak. Yes?
Yeah, pretty much. Although Michael wants me to, Michael says, I'm fascinated about the future impact of AI and human relationships. I don't know that I was until yesterday with that super creepy Google AI voice that could just sound like a person. That kind of freaks me out. I will say, there probably needs to be more research in this area. If there's not, and I want to check it out. Because one of the things I've noticed, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and to them, Siri is a person. Siri is a person who can help them, and that's weird.
So can I say something?
Yeah. Please jump in.
Great. Hi, everybody. So I am, as everybody else on this panel, I'm absolutely fascinated by this subject because it has to do with us, the human beings in this conversation. Interestingly enough, I started my career way back by doing a master's on AI. And what I find comical is, 20 years later, 20 years ago, nobody could actually spell AI. They don't know what I actually was doing for a living. But now everybody and their dog has an AI solution, an AI app, an AI everything. I mean, your speaker is talking to you. I mean, what does that mean? The next thing is your speaker is going to become your best friend. And I just read an article in HBR that basically says that in the next 5 to 10 years, these platforms, these speaker platforms will become the main interface, i.e. they will own the customer relationship to companies and products. So think about what that means. That means that a company will no longer try to develop a marketing strategy to reach out to the end clients, the human beings, to try to connect with them, create deep relationships with them, to try to create relevance with them. Instead, they will connect with AI engines. They could be your fridge, your speaker, your car, and then the car is going to make a decision on what the car is going to tell you about that product. So I'm fascinated about what does the future of humanity and human relationships look like in the presence of AI? And by the way, we are all aging ourselves here because if there would be millennials or 20-somethings in this forum, they will all tell you that Alexa is a person, and they talk to all these robots, and as much as they're concerned, they are real people. I drag the Kool-Aid. I have an executive assistant who actually is a program, who sends emails to people, who talks to them on the phone, and everybody thinks, yeah, I love Amy. Can I meet her? And I say, well, sorry, she's actually a program. She's not actually a real person. So the point is, what is this going to do to humanity? Because at the end of the day, well, guess what? People like to deal with people. People like to buy from people. People like to connect with people. And people like to do business with people, not with machines. Is that going to change?
Yeah, no, it's a super interesting area. One area that I'll John throws in to sell his.
By the way, I am a robot.
Yeah, and by the way, we're a Siri household, not an Alexa household. But it's really, yeah. Anyway, I think one of the things that's interesting. So when I spoke at Google for Undernew Management, I got a question about how do we, if this is all about motivation and internal drive and that sort of stuff, how do we do that with the AI? And my first thought was like, what is he talking about? It's a robot. Like, it's a computer algorithm. We don't necessarily need to worry about that. On the other hand, like from a network's perspective, my teenage kids think Alexa is really dumb and not intelligent. She's smarter than them, and they don't know how to talk to her. That's the thing. But from a network's perspective, that's one of the things that's interesting to me, is that when you study network science, you can study computer networks or you can study human networks, right? And each chapter in Friend of a Friend is something that's universally true when it comes to how networks operate, whether they be, as long as they're what Albert Barbès would call a scale-free network. Whether it's a human network or an electrical grid or a computer network, they follow the same sort of universal principles. What's weird to me, to your point, Michael, is what happens when the nodes are not all people or all computers, but they're sort of that interacting, because a computer is going to be more capable of keeping, like, they're going to be the new sort of super connectors. And that's a little weird. I mean, we already made references to two people, Siri and Alexa, who have more friends than anyone else on this call has, right? If you think about it. So yeah, interesting area for research, et cetera. I think it's kind of fascinating. Fascinating and scary and depressing, and nobody uses Cortana. That's true. That's true, Becky. That's accurate. So yeah, one more. So we have a little bit of time left before we get to what for me is the top of the hour and actual noon time. Those of you on the East Coast, we're almost towards 1. And if you're somewhere else, then I have no idea what time it is, because I'm terrible at time zones. Does anybody else have a question, thought, et cetera, before I've got a couple of thoughts to wrap up with, but before that, I want to make sure we get anyone else who has questions in.
Sure. Why didn't you read the audiobook in your own voice?
Because I didn't win the audition. Thanks for reminding me. So my publisher, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, doesn't have an audiobook branch, so we sell the audiobook rights to the highest bidder. This time around, actually, I'm just happy that they wanted to keep the cover uniform with the books. If you look at Under New Management, our cover, it's right there, is awesome for the book, and for the audiobook is awful. It's terrible. And I think that's why only like 200 copies of the audiobook have ever sold. For Friend of a Friend, they at least kept the same cover, so that's good. When someone else buys the rights to the book, if you're not like a superstar type person, they have you audition alongside people who are professional readers. And so I did. I auditioned and I lost, which is really depressing. And then to make it more depressing, my friend Tom Webster, who I interviewed for the book because he does a bunch of different research with a company called Edison Research, actually told me one of their clients is Audible. And one thing he knows from the data is that audiobook consumers actually prefer professional readers than the author most of the time, right? Now, I think he's wrong, but he's got data and I don't. I think it's the idea of like, if you're terrible at reading, we'd rather hear it from a professional. I think I'm pretty good, but I'm clearly not as good as PJ, who won it. I will say I've had the chance to listen to the first maybe 10 minutes or so of the final. I need to listen to the rest of it. And PJ does do a really, really good job. So I don't mind being outclassed by a professional, but that's the real reason. I will also tell you that my new plan is never to give up the audio rights to future books so that I can just demand it. Being a podcaster, I have this amazing idea of like, what if an audio book, because we interview stuff, we talk about studies, et cetera. What if the audiobook was also like listening to an episode of This American Life or Startup or like a kid? So I've got this brand new idea of like, when I write the next book, I'll do all of the interviews via recording, and I'll work with producers, et cetera, to create an audiobook that feels like a series of podcast episodes. And I think that would be, it's going to be expensive, but I think it'd be worth it.
Yeah,
that's the new plan, is to not give it up.
Yeah, John Acuff, he'll go off script, and that's like a little bonus material in the audiobooks. And yeah, I downloaded the audiobook because Hoopla, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Library, yeah. And I just saw that you're a friend of a friend just popped up onto here, and so I was like, okay, but the guy's voice, it kind of sounded a little robotic, after all that Siri conversation we just had. So
Yeah, I lost to an algorithm. No, I didn't actually. PJ is a real person, and he's had some pretty good books. And what's weird is in the process of negotiations. So I have some creative control rights, and so after I lost the audition, they still wanted me to approve the person that they hired. So I thought, like, wait. So you fired me, but you're asking me if I approve of who you hired. Like, do I throw a fit? Or do I just like, he does it. But no, he's pretty solid on it. It's a good listen. But no, I actually think, so Acuff does it. Gary Vaynerchuk, who like a lot of his stuff is in my opinion, sort of repetitive in terms of advice and what have you. But I actually really like that when he does a book, he not only goes off script, he invites other people in to read certain sections. And it feels like this, like, so doing something cool like that, I think the only way I'm going to get the ability to do it is if I keep those rights. And so we will moving forward. By the way, hi, Darlene. I just saw you pop up on there. I'm sorry you're joining us with like 2 or 3 minutes left, but hey, it works. If you've got a question, unmute yourself real quick and ask.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. I was just finishing up an article on networking for introverted architects and quoted one of your articles and then saw the cross population of this and thought I'd just jump in for whatever was left. So thanks.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I actually just wrapped up a draft. I need to get the edits back for, I don't remember which publication, Business Insider or Quartz on, I gave this in an interview and then I started thinking I need to write an article on this. I actually do think introverts are better networkers over the long term than extroverts. They might feel like I don't know how to work the room, but they're more likely to engage in deeper conversations where you start to explore multiplex ties that are going to be more handy long term than just having a big thick stack of business cards from everybody that you had a 2-minute conversation with. So I love it. I love it.
No, the thing that I came to was like, it doesn't matter. Just have some questions you can go to, but have them be questions you're really interested in hearing the answers for, because people will remember that they felt like you were interested, whether they remember the conversation or not, and that'll get an introvert to want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
Anyway,
No, totally. I did an interview with Brett McKay, who runs a site called Art of Manliness, which, if you haven't come across, I totally understand. But it's a cool little site. But Brett and I were doing the podcast interview, and he basically said, like, I feel like you could sum up all of this by like, be nice to people and be interested in them. I'm like, yeah, 256 pages. And the sum total of it is be a good human, treat everybody like a friend, and it'll work out for you over the long term. So well, I love it. Well, Becky, do we need to do any other disclaimers or anything like that before we say thanks for everybody who joined in and signed off?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, we will have a recording of this fun after party, and it will be available. David's going to create a page that has both our webinar from last week and today's after party recordings. You can also find them on Weaving Influences YouTube channel, where all the webinars I've done are, in case you want some additional free learning. But just visit David's site, because it's cooler. And yeah, thanks to all of you. We love seeing people participate with the book launch and support David's great work. So
thank you. Yeah. So I was going to say, if you missed the webinar last week, or you want to rewatch this recording or anything like that, for right now, shoot me an email at david@davidburkus.com and I'll send it to you right off the bat when it's ready. I'm getting ready to collect both and put them out as on one page and send that out to the people that are subscribed to my newsletter probably early next week. So if you don't want to wait, shoot me an email and I can send both to you. In the meantime, like I said at the top, thank you all just so much for this. I have to be honest, the weird thing about being a writer, like you chase your own interests, you know that if people don't resonate with it, you're out of a job, right? And so the scariest possible moments are right when you launch, because you're like, what's going to happen? Is it dead on arrival, or is it actually going to resonate? And, I still have no idea where this whole sort of movement of making more authentic, real relationships with people and networking based on science of human behavior and not some random person's advice on an elevator pitch. I don't know where that's going to go, but I'm really optimistic, and I'm optimistic because of people like you all who took the time to sort of be with us. So I want you to know that I don't take that lightly. Thank you all so much for that. And yeah, let me know whether you want to post an Amazon review or whether you want to tell me on social or just send me an email privately. Let me know your thoughts on it as you're reading it, because I really do sort of need to pay attention to what's resonating so that I know where to go from here. So yeah, please do. And thank you all so much for that. So we're gonna jump off now. Let some of you get a quick bite in before you have to go back to work. Let others of you, I don't know, go back to whatever you were doing. But thank you all for being a friend of mine and for supporting Friend of a Friend. Thank you all so much.